and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove, and I'm joined by a man who never cracks under questioning. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Never will I.
Doesn't matter how bright that light in your face gets, never cracks under questioning.
How uneven the chair is, how sticky the soda on the table is, I will never crack.
How old the coffee is.
That too.
So yeah, this is our second listener question show of the week. It's part of what passes for a vacation on the Total Soccer Show, is where we still pre-record some shows, listener question shows.
We still do 4 shows.
We still do 4 shows. We get shows out there, but we get to take a couple of days off and spend time with family.
There we go.
Lovely.
Ideally.
Once again, though, we are very fortunate that we have listeners who ask very smart and interesting questions and give us weird topics to talk about that we wouldn't otherwise have thought to do so, right?
Yeah.
See, earlier this week, the sneaker question.
Yes. I don't think that would have really occurred to me, but it's the type of question I enjoy because it makes me think about things in a very different way. We've got more than a few of those on today's show.
Would you like me to go first, or would you like to go first?
I'll go first. I think you went first last time, so why not I go first this time? Reggie Gooch in South Korea. Osvaldo Alonso became a U.S. citizen a few years ago, but he was never allowed to play for the USMNT because he had played for Cuba before he defected. My question is, says Reggie, do you think he would have played for the U.S. if he had been deemed eligible, and how would he have affected the U.S.'s fortunes over the course of his career?
The short answers are yes and positively.
Agreed. Yes.
Right? We're both in on this, right? So the situation is Cuba would have had to essentially strip him of his nationality, which they're not going to do the US a favour and let him play for the men's national team in that way. But if that happened, having a proper defensive midfielder who is experienced and ready to go, like Ozzy Alonso, would have been an absolute boon for the US men's national team.
Yes.
I did a bit of research. June 2012 is when he became a US citizen. So he would have been, imagine he's available soon after that. He would have been, depending on how you look at things, either an upgrade on Kyle Beckerman as a defensive midfielder, or just competition for Kyle Beckerman at that defensive midfielder spot. He's also 4 years younger than Kyle Beckerman, only 32. I know he's had a somewhat injury-plagued 2018, but apparently when he's back, he's really back. We might have qualified for the World Cup if Ozzy Alonso had been the...
you mean this time around? Yeah.
Yeah, if he could have played alongside Michael Bradley, and then we got a defensive midfielder plus Michael Bradley rather than Bradley on his own, I think we qualify for the World Cup, as an example.
I would agree. You've pretty much hit it all. I had, yes, he would have competed with Kyle Beckerman, freed up Bradley and Jones a bit more. He would have been competition for a starting spot, or at the very least squad depth that would have dramatically improved the depth within the squad.
Yep, because I would also say that for a long time, we only had Kyle Beckerman as a dedicated defensive midfielder. And Beckerman had his shortcomings, right, in terms of he wasn't that fast, couldn't cover that much ground. And he was weirdly getting towards the end of his career. I know he's still playing, but he's getting towards the end of his career by the time that people had accepted him as a valuable part of the national team that always started. I think Alonso would have been sort of even better. I think he might have played at the 2014 World Cup, for example, and who knows how much deeper we could have gone.
Yeah, I mean that's, if you look at it, if you Google it, you'll see there's articles going back to 2013, 2014, thereabouts, about when will he play, will he get a cap, will he ever feature for the U.S. I think he kind of was hesitant to talk about it too openly, aside from talking about his time with Cuba and about what led him to defecting. But then I think the strong implication was he would have been up for it.
I assume he was one of those guys that was here for a Gold Cup of some sort and defected while he was in the US for the Gold Cup.
While he was in a Walmart.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, they were shopping in a Walmart. He walked out the front door, I think borrowed someone's phone, called a friend, and then went from there.
And he's obviously had a great soccer career, but it would have been some really sweet icing on the cake for me if Ozzy Alonso had got to play for the US national team. I'm guessing for him, if he got to play for the US national team at a World Cup, for example, or a Copa America Centenario, he still would have been, only 30 or so? 2016, Copa America Centenario. He would have been a great addition to that squad too.
Yeah. And this is one where, I'm frustrated by FIFA's rules because it feels like if you defect from a country, it should then be up to you whether or not you want to represent your new country. But I get why they can't let that be the case, because then really you could have people breaking that rule and anybody can jump ship to become eligible for another national team.
Yeah, I mean, you could defect from Brazil.
Exactly.
and go and play for some tiny nation if you just wanted to play international soccer.
Exactly. Yeah. So while it's frustrating, I get why that rule's in place, but I would have been very happy to see him play for the U.S. national team for sure.
I guess, this is a great question, but also a frustrating question because it's one of those what might have been for American soccer questions. Maybe Michael Bradley's reputation would be different now if we'd been talking about an AB, Alonso Bradley partnership.
Yeah. Or maybe it's worse because he maybe would have been forced into doing more attacking stuff and maybe it wouldn't have looked good for him. Who knows? Who knows?
I think my version of alternate reality is more likely.
That's probably true. Next question then?
Yeah, next question comes from Omid Hedari. Omid says, a few years ago, I organised my first co-ed soccer team, the Vectors, and TSS provided some very helpful tips for organising an 11-a-side team. Do you remember this? We did a whole show, right? I believe they may have won a championship as well.
I think they did.
Belated congratulations to the Vectors.
I think we said congratulations to them on the show.
We did? Okay, great. Omid says, I want to follow up and see if you have any advice or strategy for organising an indoor 7v7 team. And Omid, you've come to the right place because we've played 7v7 an awful lot here in Richmond.
We have, and I would say the first thing I believe we advise with that 11-a-side team, it holds for the 7-a-side team, you need way more people than you think. That's how it works.
I'd double that for indoor because while 11-a-side happens at the weekend and people are theoretically free, indoor, if there's an early kickoff time, people are at work, or people have work events, or people are seeing something like some comedy show in the middle of the week. You need at least double the amount of players that you have on the field you need on your roster.
And you're inevitably going to have that probably first or the second game. You're going to have everybody show up, and it's going to be really frustrating because you're going to have 21 players or 20 players, and everyone's only going to get a third of the time. But it's always the case that you're also going to have the games where you have 9 people show up.
I would say 10. If you've got 7 on the field, I'd say 10 is ideal in terms of sharing minutes, right? 10 to get there. And to have 10 there every week, you need about 15 on the roster. And then for emergencies, you maybe need 5 people who are not committed to playing every week, but who are basically on standby.
Okay.
You need 5 standby players who are like, call me if you're short.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would err on the side of more is better because I think if you play the type that I would recommend, which is a more high press system.
We'll get into tactics in a second.
Yeah, I think that requires you to have more substitutions to keep those legs fresher. So I would say, maybe even like 4 to 5 subs on a regular basis is your goal.
So maybe that's 11 or 12 players for a 7-a-side game.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk tactics then.
Sure.
What do you like the best, or what would you advise that Omid does with 7 on the field, 1 goalkeeper, 6 outfield players?
Something consistent is, I guess, what I would say. Is like you have to have, especially in indoor, I think it's important to have everybody doing the exact same thing or everybody bought into the same system. Because if you have half the team pressing and half the team sitting deep, obviously that's problematic in outdoor. In indoor, I would say even more so because you're going to have a higher scoring game already, but if you have half your team standing up top trying to press people and they get bypassed, suddenly you're going to have very unfavorable numbers and you can get caught out a lot. So if you're going to press, everybody's got to press, everybody's got to step, everybody's got to man mark. If you want to sit deep, then everybody's got to collapse back, but you've got to have everybody doing the same thing.
And I would say to Omid, if your players aren't super fit, probably a defend deep and counter-attack is the way to go. Because we've played, you and I have played on a really good indoor team here in Richmond. The teams we've had trouble against are the teams that sit deep and counter-attack. Because of the much smaller place, you really can get everybody deep, you can clog the middle, and then if you all know when the right time is to break and to go, and you've got someone who's a goal-scoring threat, it's a really dangerous setup.
Yes.
So I think almost, even though I am somewhat famously a proponent of man-to-man marking and pressing in indoor, I think sitting deep.
Are you famously a proponent of that?
I mean, within our circle of friends, I am. Fair?
Sure.
Sitting deep and counter-attacking is a super effective thing to do, as long as, like you said, everybody's on the same page. Everybody knows what we're doing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think with that, you've also got to make sure that you have very good communication, because if you're going to sit back but then counterattack, you also you're at very, very much a risk of being counterattacked, because if you have 6 outfield players and you send 5 of them forward and everybody crashes and overruns, and then that shot goes off, goes wide and banks off the back wall and comes back at you, and you've got people out of position, suddenly you're very much caught in a state of transition. So I feel like while you want to counterattack, you want to make sure to communicate and make sure that you're always leaving enough numbers back to deal with any sort of counterattack threat.
What about shape? I feel like every 7-a-side team I've ever played on has played 2 defenders, 3 midfielders, 1 forward. I mean, have I been very unoriginal in just assuming that's what everybody should do?
No, I mean, I'm with you that that's what most of the teams I've ever played for do. I think if you're going 7v7, but outdoor, which tends to be a slightly smaller or larger space rather, that can you lend itself to maybe like a 3-1-2 or something like that, where you're using those wingers much more. And you could even do that in indoor, I suppose, if you had like one almost like sweeper just kind of always sitting and staying back, and then the 3 attacking on, or like then the outside wing backs attacking and getting back. That can work. I think the thing that I would say to your point about 2-3-1 working the best is that there's also something to be said for if you always have a big person, big sweeper, whatever, standing in front of your goalkeeper. It's a little bit less visibility versus having 2 kind of not standing dead center but off to the side.
Yes.
You have a little bit more range of visibility for the goalkeeper.
So that's why I think 2 defenders is best for indoor soccer. Those 2 need to talk to each other quite a lot, right? I think the other big thing is whatever shape you play and whatever your tactic is, you can't just stand in that shape, right? There needs to be movement. Like the central striker needs to come wide and the wide guys need to come central. You've got to confuse the opposition a bit with a bit of moving around.
Yes.
Yeah?
And my final thing I think I'll say on this one, then again, maybe we'll talk for another 10 minutes, who knows, is you're right, movement is very important. As with everything in soccer, the type of movement is also important. If you're going 70% speed from left to right and from right to left and you kind of never change your pace, it's really easy for the opposition to sort of just track with you, stick with you, and you're never really going to be that much of a threat, because even if you're going 70% and get the ball, it's not like you're in a position where then all of a sudden you're turning and going 100% and you've put yourself in a position where you're not marked. I feel like you've got to kind of have those changes of speed, those bursts of pace to throw off the defense, or at the very least pull somebody with you so you open up space for another player.
I've got some don'ts that I feel like maybe less experienced indoor players will be tempted to do. Don't always kick it off the board, right? I've seen less talented teams, what they end up doing is because they've got the wall and because they get maybe forced wide, they get really tempted into thinking it's as good as a cross if I just bang it off the wall as hard as I can. That ball is almost certainly not reaching your teammate. If it does, it's by pure luck. What you're mostly doing is giving the ball away if you try and bang it off the wall as you're out.
Unless you're trying to create some sort of like, if you don't have a pass on and you feel like there's pressure, you're not sure what else to do, I can see the merit of banging it in off the wall to sort of create a little bit of chaos if that's what you're going for. But yeah, if you're trying to pass it off the wall to a player in the middle, more often than not, you're probably not going to complete that pass.
I mean, unless you're a pool champion, then you probably don't have the angles off the wall.
Or Leo Messi. Leo Messi could probably do it.
He probably could. He's probably very good at it.
He knows his angles.
But you're better off passing directly with your feet to someone else's feet. Yeah, fair. The other don't I would suggest is, I mean, actually, one extra one, don't shoot from kickoff ever. Goalkeeper, don't get your goalkeeper to throw it long all the time. I've played on teams that are not good, and it becomes you get so desperate when you get the ball that you want to launch a quick counter-attack. The keeper will throw it long all the time. All you do is really, in the end, give it back to the other team, and then you end up defending again. And it's better if it's an element of surprise when you do throw it long.
I mean, I agree to some extent. I think for me, it always comes down to having a plan. And if you have planned for, look, we're going to try to go long every time, but here's how we're going to do it, that's I think the difference for me is that a lot of the times when it is looking long every time, it's because it looks like, oh, that's on, I'll throw it to this player. But if the other team has kept 2 defenders back, as we've talked about in a 2-3-1, and you have 1 forward, they're always going to be kind of able to handle that long ball over the top. But if you are starting on one side and sprinting to the other, and then another person is sprinting long into the space you vacated, and that long throw goes into space where nobody is but you're running, it can work if that's what you've planned for.
Right.
Similarly, if you're playing short, it works if that's what you've planned for. But if you're just going short every time and everybody's running forward, and then you get the ball in turn, and now you've got a wall of defenders and then everybody up top, that doesn't really work either. So I think for me, it's about making sure everybody's on the same page across the board.
Another one I've got, follow shots. Because the thing with indoor is quite often people will hit the boards or the keeper will make a save. Rebounds are huge, right? A lot of goals end up being from rebounds because if you shoot it wide, it's still coming back into play off the board. Unless you go really high and wide and you hit the netting.
Yeah, that's not great.
The one final thing I want to ask about is substitutions.
Yep.
What would you recommend in terms of how people handle substitutions, in terms of like how many minutes or some sort of system?
I guess maybe I'm all about communication, it seems, today, because I don't think there's any one rule. If you've got 2 very fit people who like long stretches of time, maybe if you're playing a 25-minute half, each of them gets 12 and a half minutes, you could go that way. I don't like to work that way because I feel like having a few shifts and a half works better for me. But I think the biggest thing I would say, having played in teams where you've got different personalities, is making sure that, say you're in a 2-3-1 and there's 2 strikers. So I'm one striker, there's another striker. You want to make sure that we've had that conversation about when we're subbing and how many minutes roughly we're getting, so that you're not that person who, I played the first 10 minutes, Daryl comes on and replaces me, he plays 6 minutes, and then like, hey, Daryl, it's time for a sub, I'm ready to go. And suddenly Daryl's like, well, no, man, you played 10 minutes, and then there can be that little bit of frustration, so then maybe Daryl has to pretend like he hasn't heard me for 4 minutes until he's ready, and then you're sort of playing against each other and not playing against your opponent. And so
I've seen that happen.
Yeah.
I've seen that happen. I've been on a team that happened, I left that team.
Yep.
Right? So don't let that happen to your team. So you have to self-police, or if Omid is organising this team, maybe Omid has to police and make sure that people are sharing minutes correctly.
I've definitely appreciated when I've been on teams, like if I was new to them and I was like, hey, do you want to sub? And then somebody on the bench would be like, don't ask, tell them. And then it is sort of like, hey, you ready? I'm coming on.
I think that's a good tip, actually. If you see that happening within your team, encourage people to just tell people when they're being subbed out.
Yeah. And I would, man, sorry, we've gone long on this
one,
but
fine,
I'm cool with it.
I think this is interesting stuff.
I would say that, like, I would also add, it's really hard in the moment to sub yourself out, but if you're tired, it's so much better just to get that sub and get a rest rather than be like, no, I can fight through it. Because even if you can fight through it, and even if you can still go at 90% capacity, that's still 10% you're not going. Whereas that person on the bench is ready to go. No. Yeah. And eventually you're going to get tired and you're going to make a mistake because you're tired. That's how it works. So trying to be like tough and fighting it out, I would say even like I've had those games where I just wasn't hydrated enough or hadn't had enough sleep or just wasn't fit enough, and it was like, yeah, I can sub out maybe 3 minutes early. I'm ready for a break, and I think that's the better mentality.
One more thing just occurred to me: don't get stretched out. Right? No matter what your shape is, no matter what your plan is, the worst thing you can do as an indoor team is have half the people up front, half the people at the back, and big gaps in between. You're definitely conceding a goal at that point. And that's mostly about just players all making sure that you move as a unit. Like defenders sometimes, I think, push high, like be aware behind you, but push high and stay with the strikers. Strikers or wingers, most of you need to come back at some point to make sure there isn't great big gaps between your team.
Yes. Yeah. All right. I think that's all I have to say. From a playing standpoint, my other piece of advice for anybody at any game at any level is
7-a-side or 11-a-side or anything?
At anything. Yeah. At halftime, have a person whose job it is to say what you're going to do and how you're going to fix stuff. Because we've both also been on those teams where you have 11 players saying 11 different things and everybody ends up talking. And one of my favorite lessons I learned from like a coaching course was have 3 things. Like, maybe you can go more than that, but generally have the 3 things you want to work on, because what tends to happen, I know you've been in these conversations where Daryl will say, hey, we really got to make sure we get back and keep a defensive shape. And then somebody else will say, yeah, but while we do that, we got to make sure we're counterattacking well. Then the goalkeeper will say, well, if we're counterattacking, we can't send too many forward. Then somebody else will say, well, but we don't want to not send players forward. And suddenly you're all just kind of going in a circle and no one's ever coming to a conclusion.
And it's essentially everybody just giving their complaint about the first half rather than us as a team deciding on a plan for the second half.
And there's a weird thing where...
That's 2 different things.
Exactly. But if everybody has their voice heard in that way, there can be this strange feeling of like, okay, yeah, we talked it out and everybody's kind of on the same page, because you can feel that way. Because it ends with like clapping, and like, let's go, let's win this half. But you haven't actually figured anything out. It's just everybody aired their grievances versus saying, look, we got to make sure we stay compact, we got to make sure we track runners, and we got to make sure we get a few more shots on goal. Like, you got to have those specific things we want to work on so that people can work on them in the second half.
All right. Okay, I think that's a lot of 7v7 advice. Go Vectors. I'll bet the Vectors will win an indoor championship as well now.
The interior Vectors. Yes.
Interior Vectors. Today's show is sponsored by a company that makes shoes you should not wear for indoor soccer because they're too nice. You should wear Greats. Taylor's on the table.
Yep.
Very limber.
I'm sure that noise will be lovely for our listeners.
Very nice. Greats are Brooklyn's first sneaker company, or to put it in an American way, Greats is Brooklyn's first sneaker company. The shoes are made in Italy by experts.
Nice Italian leather, supple Italian leather. I'm wearing them right now. Nice and comfy.
Yeah. So you have 2 pairs. I have 2 pairs of Greats because essentially they they send us some when we do the ads, which is a very nice perk of doing ads for Great sneakers. We asked each other before if you could buy another pair, or if they maybe gave us another pair as part of a new advertising deal. Which pair would you like?
Sure.
So what's your great pair of sneakers that you would like to get?
So I've got like a pair of low tops. I got a pair of high tops of both sneakers. I think I'd maybe go a little bit more formal.
Medium tops?
No, I'd go, I guess they're still kind of high toppy, but I'd go the Hirsch Dune. They've got the more formal look, but still a little bit relaxed. But, you know, something that I think right now I have white and I have like bright shiny black with white trim. So like maybe something a little more mellow would be good.
So the one thing I appreciate about Greats is that they essentially, their website copy told me that the Hirsch are not for me. Like, I like the look of them in the photo, but they explain that they're, I think, a narrow fit and not, if you have a wide foot, you'll have to like go a couple sizes up. But I appreciate knowing that before I buy online. Like, this is why.
I didn't read that, and I do have a wide foot.
Oh, this is why they're a successful e-commerce retailer. Because you sort of need to know as much as you can before you get it shipped to you. So I think the Hirsch wouldn't be a great fit for me.
Yeah, fine. Well, what are you going to order then? Yeah.
Well, I know that the Royales are a good fit for me. I have some high top Royales. I want to go for some bright white Royales.
Okay.
I'm going to go Royale Gum.
Okay.
So that's the white leather with that. I guess gum is the color description they've chosen that the base of the sole of the shoe is made from.
Okay.
So you know what I'm talking about?
Can you give us more of a description than gum?
The gum, it's like a sandy, rubbery color. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, like a
tan?
A tan color, color, yeah. So Royale Gum is what I'd be going for.
Gotcha.
So also realize I don't have any bright shoes. All my shoes are dark colors, but I've spotted you wearing those whites and I think, I quite like those.
There we go.
But I can't go all white because Taylor's wearing all white. So Royale Gum would be the way to go.
We would just look like we're in a shoe cult.
Yeah,
It'd be fine.
Exactly. We don't want to be in a shoe cult. We want to be in a shoe association.
Yeah. So if you don't want to be in a shoe cult, but you do want to try some Greats, you can do so, and you can do so at a discount, Mr. Grove.
At Greats.com, which is where you'll find all the Greats sneakers. Use the discount code TSS. It's TSS for 15% off. TSS for 15% off at Greats.com.
Thank you very much to Greats for keeping our feet, protected with the shoes, but also for sponsoring today's episode.
And looking good.
Yeah, that as well. Daryl Grove, question for you comes from Dorian Bentoncourt. In terms of prominence, sending players to top clubs, Europe, sending players to their national teams, etc., can you rank the big leagues of the Americas, for example, Major League Soccer, the Brazilian League, Argentina, Mexico, Colombia, etc.?
So, not successfully, not definitively.
Yep.
But I can have a go.
Sure.
How about that?
Yep. That's about where I am with it.
All right. So I guess since you asked me, I'll go first. Easily the top two. Easily the top two. Brazil and Argentina.
Yep.
Right? Definitely Brazil and Argentina.
And I think I would put them in that order, but that might be
I think I would too.
But that might be like a publicity bias almost because we hear about, the Vinicius Juniors of the world commanding massive transfers.
So, for example, Vinicius Junior, I can't remember his team now, but he went straight from Brazilian team to Real Madrid.
Yep.
Neymar went straight from Santos to Barcelona.
Corinthians,
I
think.
And really didn't miss a beat,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of Brazilian players have gone straight from their team. Artur has gone
might be
from...
Sao Paulo, I forget which. I'm still on where Vinicius Junior is. Anyway.
Come with me then. So Artur just went from Grêmio straight to Barcelona, and we were just praising him this past weekend for looking like the new Xavi. So I feel like there's a really strong Brazilian league straight to top level of European soccer. Not that much of a problem situation. But Argentina's not bad either, right? There's a lot of players go from River Plate and Boca Juniors and go straight into European soccer. My agreement with you in that Brazil is slightly ahead is that I think they've won more. Brazilian teams have won more Copa Libertadores recently, and I think the economy of Brazilian football is slightly stronger than the economy of Argentinian football, at least recently. But I don't have any hard evidence for that.
Yeah, and
except for Copa Libertadores,
and maybe that's where maybe that's where it's worth noting again that I don't think either one of us would claim to be experts on South American soccer or South American club soccer. So fairly large grain of salt here. But I would also say that it does feel like you hear more about Brazilian players going back to finish their careers in Brazil, and maybe that also stands out in my mind a little bit because you have Ronaldinho going back and playing for a decent amount of time in the Brazilian league. You still get some of those. I think Carlos Tevez is back in Argentina, but for the most part, it feels like it's the Brazilian veterans going back, and so you've got the really exciting youngsters, you've got the names then they're kind of still competing in their domestic competitions, but also the international competitions. It feels like, Brazil, maybe one, Argentina, maybe two.
Okay, but definitely those two, top two. What comes next is the trickier part, right?
Yeah.
Because I look at, say, Uruguay, right? I think the Uruguayan league, not so bad, but a lot of players end up going from Uruguay because of geographical proximity and because of the strength of the league. Before they move to Europe, they will often go to an Argentinian team first and then make the move to Europe. So I want to say Uruguay, but I don't feel confident ranking, say, Uruguay above Mexico. because so many players like Chucky Lozano go from Mexico straight to the Eredivisie.
I have Mexico as my third.
You do?
For that reason, exactly. Because Chicharito, the same. He went from Chivas to Manchester United. You have those jumps. Then you have the Chucky Lozanos going to like smaller tier European clubs, but likely moving on to a larger one after that.
Yeah.
And it does feel like you have fewer Mexican players going to another league in that region and then making that jump. It feels like Liga MX, for the most part, prepares them for that jump.
Yeah.
On I would say, like, larger scale than, say, a league like Colombia, where you have huge names coming out of Colombia. Obviously, Falcao, James Rodriguez, Juan Cuadrado. But I don't know if you have them as consistently across Europe as you might Mexican players.
And I bet it's a similar situation with, say, Uruguay, where a lot of Colombians end up in the Argentinian league before then making the jump, right? Okay, so maybe in the middle then we've got Uruguay, Paraguay, Colombia, not in that order. I'd say Uruguay, Colombia.
We haven't talked about Chile much. I'm not sure why that is.
Oh, yeah, I don't know much about the Chilean league. Maybe we put Chile in that little bracket there. And I would say, in terms of them moving to Europe, MLS probably comes just below those leagues, which it's not massively encouraging to put them so low down the list, but I think that's where we are.
No, that is where we are, and I think part of that is the structure of the league itself. It makes it harder.
How hard it is to extract a player from there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, because you don't have that free flow of players, you don't have as many players making that jump on a consistent basis versus a club can come in and offer a Brazilian team or a Colombian team X amount of money, and then that player's gone. It doesn't always work that way in Major League Soccer.
I think you have to win an arm wrestling match with Don Garber.
I think it's something like that, yeah. But only
get Tyler Adams.
On like a weekday between the hours of noon and 4, but it has to coincide. But yeah, it's a whole bunch of rules.
During office hours, right?
I don't know.
But then there is an interesting thing happen where certain players, like let's say Miguel Almiron, will, instead of making the move directly to Europe, Almiron's Paraguayan, right? Will go to Major League Soccer. I don't know if maybe because they can get, if you're a big name, you can get a big contract, right? You can make some good money in Major League Soccer without having the big move to Europe. So it's almost like MLS is a nice stepping stone for already big name players like Almiron, but that doesn't necessarily mean that MLS is a better league to move to Europe from than Paraguay.
Yep.
That makes sense?
100% it does. And I would agree.
All right. I feel weirdly confident despite not having all that information to work with.
And maybe this is one where I welcome people telling us their thoughts on this one, because I'm sure there are people who have a lot of familiarity with the Colombian league and will write in to say actually more Colombians make it to Europe at a higher level than in Mexico. And I welcome that piece of information because I would like to know.
And it may just be we're more familiar with Liga MX than we are with the Colombian league. I couldn't even tell you what the Colombian league's called, to be honest.
It's the Liga de Colombia.
Get out of here. Get out of here.
All right. In that case, I will not get out of here, but we will move on to the next question.
Let's do that. Matt Koss says, inspired by Halloween's Michael Myers, he just saw the film, I think, who would you say is the most relentless soccer player in a Michael Myers style? Type of player that never gives up, tries as hard as possible, man marks to death, etc. Who is the Michael Myers of soccer in terms of being relentless?
So as I am wont to do, I sort of misinterpreted this question at first. So I made it more about like what player do I think could like reminds me of Michael Myers, and I have answers to that.
Okay.
But in rereading it and thinking about who is the most relentless player, the answer to me is Luis Suarez. That is my answer. And it's not necessarily about like the man marking aspect, but it's what we talked about this weekend. It's about he is, first of all, I think, an incredibly ruthless competitor, as we've seen on a number of occasions. That can be both good and bad. But I think he is going to do anything in his power to win, to beat an opponent, to conquer an opponent, if you want to go the Michael Myers route. And that means he'll drop back and play defense. He'll stay up top. He'll man mark. He'll track. He'll drop in. He'll do whatever it takes to make his team win. But he'll also be violently angry if it doesn't go his way.
And what was your probably more literal Michael Myers answer?
I mean, when I think Michael Myers, so the one, like the two obvious ones in my mind, or the one obvious one, prone to explosive bouts of violence, will hunt down the opposition, seems to be sent away, but then returns. That's how all the sequels work.
Still Luis Suarez?
It's Roy Keane. Roy Keane. But if you want to go a different route, slow, because Michael Myers is like, we never see him run. He's not a jogger, Michael Myers.
Not a jogger.
Slow, relentless.
Doesn't stay in shape.
Not so much. Relentless, but he's going to keep coming back all the time, and eventually he's probably going to get his target. Lethal, we know that much. Very big. Harry Kane comes to mind, is all I'm saying. Slow, relentless, lethal, big. That's Harry Kane.
On target? Is Michael Myers on target?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, he doesn't do a lot of like the scream killer like missing. I think when he's stabbing, he's stabbing.
When he's stabbing, he's stabbing. That should be the tagline if there are any more Halloween sequels.
And he does notoriously in a couple of the sequels draw penalties that maybe shouldn't have been given. That's a weird aspect of those movies.
He just wanders into a soccer game. Okay, in terms of relentlessness, N'Golo Kante.
Yeah.
He's the opposite of Michael Myers in terms of how friendly
but he's too sweet.
and
I know.
fun and sweet and happy he is. But he flicks. As soon as the game is on, flips a switch. N'Golo Kante is relentless. Just in terms of running, right? He is constantly covering ground all the time, sniffing out that ball, making sure he intercepts and wins the ball. I think N'Golo Kante is the most relentless player out there.
Okay. I still have a hard time making N'Golo Kante in any way representative of Michael Myers.
Well, just the relentless aspect. This is, again, you misinterpreting the question.
Maybe. But I feel like that if you're saying who has the relentlessness of Michael Myers, I feel like N'Golo Kante, I'm just like, no, he's too smiley. So if it was a smiling William Shatner mask, then maybe I'd be on board.
Isn't that, I may have these terms incorrect, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that an example of a sociopath when they can do a very good impression of a nice, friendly person, but none of it's real?
Maybe. I never quite know the difference between a sociopath and a psychopath.
Okay.
So let's just say sure.
I'm going to suggest that that's what N'Golo Kante is doing. He's putting on a very good act of being a very friendly person.
Oh, so not only...
The real N'Golo Kante comes out when you play soccer, and he is ruthless and relentless.
So not only are you saying N'Golo Kante is like Michael Myers, you're also saying he's a sociopath?
Yeah, it's all calculated. All that lovable man act is completely calculated so that people underestimate him when they get out on the soccer field.
Daryl at TotalSoccerShow.com, listeners. Daryl at TotalSoccerShow.com.
The other one I had, just based on what Tab Ramos told us, is Tyler Adams. He is relentlessly self-improving. Remember Tab Ramos telling us that Adams is constantly mad at himself and then fixing the problems he sees with his own game. There's definitely a relentlessness to Tyler Adams in that way that makes me optimistic for the future of American soccer, at least in one of the midfield spots.
I like that one. I agree with that one. And I know this isn't quite the question, but I do love the idea of if you're going the self-improvement route of Michael Myers, like it just cuts to a scene of him like figuring out like, how could I stab better? Like I could have done that one a little bit better, a little bit more efficiently. It wasn't quite the jump scare I was going for. I could do that better next time.
I'll get it next time.
Yeah.
I'll get it next time. Jamie Lee Curtis. All right. So today's show is sponsored by Roughneck Scarves.
Speaking of Michael Myers.
Roughneck Scarves. Michael Myers does not wear a scarf.
He does not.
These are not approved. Roughneck Scarves are US Soccer and Major League Soccer approved. We thought today would be a good day to focus on Roughneck Scarves' Major League Soccer offerings because Decision Day, do we still call it that, is coming this weekend. For example, Sporting KC, LAFC. And then the playoffs begin. We spent a good few minutes looking at possible playoff scenarios here on Total Soccer Show.
Maybe you didn't think your team was going to make it, so now you want to kind of freshen up your look. Roughneck Scarves has you covered, every team in there. Maybe you want to be sad about the season, but show your support still. You can get a scarf that way too.
Yep, and if you think your team is going deep into the playoffs, that means, depending on where you live, it's going to get colder.
Yep.
And you'll be attending games in the cold. You may actually need a scarf to keep your neck warm.
See?
Yeah?
It all works out.
Which is not the main use of a soccer scarf, but it's also a use that can happen with a soccer scarf.
Yes.
Stuff can be two things.
And it maybe could stop a Michael Myers attack. You never know. I
guess if you hold the scarf up as he's coming, it's probably good for preventing one or two slashes.
And if
then you need a plan B.
If you wore like 5 of them at once, I feel like it'd be tough to get through.
Yeah, that's true.
See? Always thinking outside the box for the Total Soccer Show.
I say run.
Okay.
He's as slow as Harry Kane.
That's probably a better plan.
So all kinds of MLS scarves available at roughneckscarves.com, and they're available for 20% off if you use the discount code Total Soccer Show. All one word, Total Soccer Show, for 20% off at roughneckscarves.com.
So thank you to Roughneck Scarves for sponsoring today's episode. One last question, Mr. Grove, but I feel like it might take us a while to get through it. Andy Larimer.
We just got warmed up with all the Michael Myers stuff. Yeah.
Andy Larimer, what are some of your favorite television programs, and what fictional television character would you hire to coach the U.S. men's national team? I've taken this as I will give you my favorite shows, but I've also tried to take a character from each one as a possible coaching candidate.
Interesting. I will invite you to go first then.
Okay. I would say The Gang from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I do enjoy The Gang gets the U.S. kicked out of a World Cup. Not even the U.S. fails to qualify. I feel like that was a joke that was made at the time.
Wait, is that a real episode?
No, I'm just saying that. See, that's my point. Thank you for proving my point. Like, wouldn't you expect that? They all got hired, and then it's like, we're going to the World Cup. Hooray, we're going to Russia. We're going to Qatar. And then the gang gets kicked out of the World Cup.
That would not go well.
It would not. But, I mean, we saw it when...
Unless the Dennis system is some sort of man-marking thing.
Hey, it could be. I mean, in a way it is. It's also the case that they did manage the youth basketball teams to varying degrees of success. They all had their own managerial styles. I believe Max was knees and elbows was very important.
I mean,
yeah,
that could have come in handy down in Trinidad.
I mean, it could have. It teaches you how to CONCACAF, I gotta say. No, I do not think that would be a very good answer, but that is one of my favorite shows.
Okay, one of my favorite shows growing up, and I'm bringing this up because I referenced it the other day, Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Okay.
I think it's still an incredible TV show, and I would have Captain Picard as US men's national team coach because he would have picked Danny Williams.
He sure would have. The Huddersfield fan? Is Captain Jean-Luc Picard a Huddersfield fan?
No, but Patrick Stewart is.
Have we ever established why his name is Jean-Luc Picard?
Because it's the future, and like the EU went a lot better than in real life.
I gotcha.
And there's a lot of sort of trans-national identities.
I'm sure that question is rests upon well-trod ground. I'm guessing I'm not the first one to ask that.
I mean, really, if you think really far into the future, England and France aren't that far apart. There's no real reason why it shouldn't be more connected.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
That's why his name's Jean-Luc Picard.
It's a proper Viking mentality you have there.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's from your childhood. Anything more recently?
Genuinely, like,
you're going with it. Okay.
Like man of honor, like natural moral authority, all that sort of stuff. He always makes good, painful decisions. I think Jean-Luc Picard would be an excellent US
You're
national
so
team
British,
coach.
man of honor. Oh goodness gracious!
You would see him on the sideline doing that thing where he pulls his.
Oh yeah.
He'll be pulling his US soccer tracksuit nice and tight against his body, like make sure everything's still nice and formal.
Yeah, is he managing in a onesie?
Definitely, yeah. Okay. The US soccer onesie.
Okay.
Invented. Yeah.
Oh boy. I can see it, and I feel like he has like the communicator built in, so you could talk pretty easily with the rest of the team. I think that works pretty well. All right, on the field instructions, you don't have to scream, but he can. We know he can do that too. Okay, all right. You may have swayed me on that one.
You'd be like, look, Dr. Crusher to the halfway line, please.
Yeah.
What else you got for me?
I would say I do love The Office. I don't know if Michael Scott would be a very good manager for the national team.
I know that he would be terrible.
Why do you say that? You've never even seen The Office, have you?
I've seen it.
Okay, so why do you think he'd be terrible?
Because he's more interested in how he appears. He's too self-conscious and worried about his own image than he is about the success of The Office.
See, I think you've seen the British Office.
How well do Dunder Mifflin do?
Their branch does very well. They're consistently the best branch in the company.
Way.
Because, and there are varying explanations as to why.
Okay, I've underestimated Michael Scott.
In fact, I believe, is the reason, spoiler alert, why they're acquired by another company later on is because the branches work so well, but the company does not.
Interesting.
So there you go. And that's what I would say. He's very good-natured as well, even though he is very obnoxious for most of the series. He still cares about his employees or his players in this situation. But I think he's so naive, and he would make so many mistakes and probably be swindled by every manager out there and talked into oh yeah, I'm not going to play any of my best players. And then he would believe them. So I don't think that works so well.
But he would have good advice for the strikers, right? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Exactly. You definitely credit that to himself too. And then in smaller font, the actual person who said it.
I feel like all of yours have been comedies so far, so I'm going Parks and Rec.
Okay.
Parks and Rec, maybe my favourite TV show of all time, because it's one of those things where the laughs per minute are really, really high, right? It's constantly funny, and yet there's definitely a proper narrative with every episode that sort of, you kind of feel something every episode, right? There's real emotions there. Leslie Knope would be my US men's national team manager. We would be the best prepared team in the entire world.
Or would we be overly prepared? Because that's the other side of it.
No such thing. Okay, this isn't a thing where you pick apart my choices. This is a thing where you come on board and listen to my choices and go there.
Didn't you begin by criticizing Michael Scott?
I did, but then I changed tack really quickly.
Okay.
All right. Leslie Knope, we would be very well prepared. Imagine the size of the opposition dossier that she would produce for every single game we have. Leslie Knope would be absolutely brilliant at that. You've seen her inspire the entire staff, the Parks and Rec department, to not just do their regular jobs, but to go overtime and help her run for city council, for example. She inspires people to go above and beyond. Leslie Knope for US men's national team coach.
I like it. And I'm with you on Parks and Rec. It's the same thing. They're kind of the same in my mind, Parks and Rec and The Office, in terms of very feel-good shows that you can watch pretty much every episode, and they're good and they'll make you laugh, and they won't you can escape from the present reality.
Won't bring you down.
They will not.
What else you got?
I would say I'm going to kind of handcuff two here because I'm going to say there was a season where it worked very well. That's what I'm going to go with because I don't think Stringer Bell on his own could handle the U.S. national team because he would always be obsessed with theoretical tactics, but not necessarily what was happening on the ground. So it'd be like
more of a business manager.
But within the context of the show, he's always trying to like do different stuff. He's always like, oh, we're going to change it, we're going to do this, but doesn't really notice what's actually happening, and that's where I think you'd run into problems. He needs Avon. So I'm saying Avon Barksdale is my coach with Stringer Bell as the assistant. That's where it works. Specifically from season 1 before maybe things go the way they go.
You get the ruthlessness from Avon.
See, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, and we saw it in the basketball game. Yes, they end up losing that one to Prop Joe, but Prop Joe we're not going to worry about. But I feel like he's got the intensity that you want from a coach. He's kind of got the personality that you're going to be a little bit afraid. So you're going to do what he says. You're going to execute that game plan. And then Stringer's there to keep coming up with new innovations for how to grow the team.
So it's a Barksdale Bell, like
B&B.
Small picture, big picture combo partnership.
Yep. And also, I love that show so much. I think of any non-comedy, it is the show that I've watched the most. As in, I've watched it like probably 7 times.
It's a show, I mean, I'm sure people are sick of having The Wire recommended to them, but for me, it's a show that makes me think about how all pieces of society interact and what the problems are at every level of society. So there's that deep thought to it. It's also, weirdly, quite funny.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's an entertaining show because it's regular people having those sort of quick-witted conversations, right?
But it's also grounded in reality too. That that makes the comedy funnier because it's not just weird moments of comedy that don't really work. It fits within the characters themselves.
It's real people comedy as opposed to sitcom comedy, right?
But but it's
not Ross from Friends.
It's not. It's up there though. It's up there with like The Sopranos in my mind as like a show where if you watch the clips on YouTube, if you just watch individual clips and then read the comments, you can see so many different opinions on what's happening within the scene, but so many just like every scene has so much weight to it. And again, I know we're going down that road of like The Wire is the best thing ever. So are The Sopranos. But like I think season 3 begins with the towers coming down, and then like the dust goes everywhere, and there's politicians there and like reporters and regular people, and the dust like smothers everybody, and everybody starts coughing. And like that's the beginning of the season, which is representative of how bringing down the towers spreads the drug epidemic across the city. Like little tiny things like that are like 30 seconds long within an hour-long show. It's amazing how much stuff they fit in there. So I love that show so much.
So bringing it back to soccer, I know that and I guess spoiler alert for The Wire, I know that the Bell-Barksdale partnership...
Yeah, that's why I said season 1.
breaks up at some point. My question is, are they successfully together long enough to go a full national team cycle?
Yes, I think so.
How long do they last?
I think because in this situation, Avon's not getting locked up. That probably makes a big difference.
So as long as we can get through one cycle of a tournament, even a Copa America or a World Cup, I think we'd be good to go.
I think as long as Stringer had Avon to kind of check his delusions of grandeur a little bit, like then as long as he was the number 2, I think he was okay. It was when he became the number 1 and didn't have anybody to be like, nah, it's a bad idea. Now that's stupid. So as long as Stringer is staying as like the first team coach, I think we're going to be okay. Yeah.
Head coach and first team coach.
Yeah, and then a little bit working on like theoretical tactics.
Tactics.
Yeah.
Okay, my final choice is from 2 shows that I really like, Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul.
Wow.
Gustavo Fring.
Okay.
Gustavo Fring.
The reason I said wow because I was like, it can't be Saul, and I'm guessing it's not Mike, so that leaves us with Gus.
Gustavo Fring, 1, bilingual.
Yep.
We want a U.S. national team coach who's bilingual. 2, long-term planning. 3, makes cold, hard decisions, but at the same time, as well as being like cold and hard, he is polite and humble in public.
He drives a Volvo, man.
He drives a Volvo. You visit the Chicken Brothers restaurant. He's all like, "Hello, how can I help you?" So he's got like a really good public-facing face, but really sort of cold and calculated behind the scenes. Great at logistics. If you want to get the national team players from one location to another without anyone noticing, he can make that happen for you. Biggest of all, he beat the Colombians.
Yep.
And no U.S. coach has done that in a few years.
You're right. I think his connections around the world and his relationship with them, it's important because, he's got the Colombia connection. He's very much plugged into what's going on in Mexico. I believe he even has connections in Europe, specifically Germany. So I think, he's got all those connections. He's got the mentality. I'm with you. That's
Gustavo
a good one.
Fring for U.S. men's national team coach. You got any more? That's me exhausted.
I have one quick one, one longer one. Ray Holt from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, the captain in Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
But
he's a tactical mastermind. He inspires loyalty. He's intimidating. But I think he's just a little too dry. I'm not sure he's going to be the motivator you want. So my other one that I would genuinely enjoy would be Ragnar Lothbrok from Vikings. There you go. Another tactical genius. Definitely not afraid of scrutiny. He can handle it, but he's kind of, he's going to do his own thing. He's not going to let you in on his plans. It's all going to be very surprised, but you won't see anything coming. And
I'm imagining tactical talk with Ragnar would be this thing where he's like, no one's ever attacked this wing.
Exactly.
We should send the boats down this wing.
And it would be, and in keeping with the character, it would be that, but it would be whispered, and then screamed at one point. That's how it works. And he's proven that he can win in England and France. So I think, he's got the managerial pedigree that we want.
All right, I think that's definitely enough of that.
All right.
But thank you.
I should also add, I haven't seen either of the most recent seasons of Vikings. For various reasons. And I'll leave it at that.
No manager should stay for too many titles.
Yeah, that's good.
So thank you, Andy Larimer, for that question. Thank you to everybody for today's questions. If you've got questions for us in the future, it is totalsoccershow.com/questions. If you support the show via totalsoccershow.com/join at $10 a month or more, we guarantee to answer a question of yours per month on the Total Soccer Show, unless it's terrible.
Unless it's terrible.
But they're mostly not terrible, but we just want to have that caveat, just so we've got an escape hatch if we need it.
They're mostly not terrible.
No, they're mostly good, but occasionally there's one that we can't answer.
Gotcha.
All right, so totalsoccershow.com/questions. Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Right back at you, buddy.
Listeners, thank you for listening, and we will talk to you again sometime soon. We're not sure exactly when.